Thanos, thank you so much for having us today. I think this is such a pertinent and important issue to discuss today. It's on everyone's mind around the world. And I thought that Jonathan would be the perfect guest for this program. He has spoken to so many people around the world for many, many years, for decades, in fact, around issues relating to the crisis we see right now. So I'd like to introduce Jonathan Granoff. He is an attorney, a professor, and author. He's an international advocate, and he emphasizes the legal, spiritual, and ethical dimensions of peace and security. Jonathan's specific focus is on advancing the rule of law to address international threats such as nuclear weapons, and he serves on numerous governing and advisory boards, including the Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, who he represented at hearings at the United Nations just last month. He's also a fellow of the World Academy of Arts and Science and the senior advisor to the Permanent Secretariat of the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates. As president of the Global Security Institute, he has spent decades working with legislators, politicians, world leaders, motivating them to move away from the idea of military security toward one of human security instead. Some of his board members include former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, Nobel Peace Laureate and former president of Costa Rica, Oscar Arias, and Kim Campbell, who is the former Prime Minister of Canada. He has been a featured guest and expert commentator on numerous radio and television programs, and he joins us today to speak about the crisis in Ukraine. He believes the press are not doing enough to highlight the legal aspects of the Russian invasion, and that establishing a healthy legal system is key to avoiding future conflicts around the world. Just a quick note as we get into the discussion, if you can please keep your eye on the chat bar during the discussion. I'll be adding a few links that Jonathan has shared with me that will support his arguments and also act as a good reference should you wish to write a story about today's discussion, which we hope you'll do, of course. So now I'd like to just quickly introduce Dmitry Anopchenko, is the chief US correspondent for InterTV channel, the most popular Ukrainian national broadcaster. He's the former anchor of one of the top-rated Sunday news shows on Ukrainian TV called The Details of the Week. He started his career in TV when he was only 19 years old and has become one of the most experienced foreign correspondents in the country. He's based in Washington, D.C., and as he mentioned earlier, his family are in Kiev at the moment, which must be a very stressful time for him. This is obviously a very personal thing. We look forward to hearing from him on his thoughts from his home country. So Jonathan, I'd like to kick off by asking you if you could give us some opening statements around your general sense of what's happening in the world right now. This is affecting everyone, not just Ukraine. What are the biggest things that you're seeing out there which we should be taking note of?
Before I offer my opinion about anything, I want to express my heartfelt solidarity for the courageous citizens of the Ukraine who, under the threat of life and limb, are standing up for all of us in the world for the basic human dignity and freedom and democracy and the values that are necessary for civilization. They're standing up for the principle that their human rights are not just for one people or one country. They're for all of us, and their human right to safety and security, it's being threatened. It threatens all of our rights. And so that's the very first point I want to make. The second point is I want to reach out and offer my solidarity with the courageous people in Russia, the diplomats who were lied to, the diplomats who had to represent Russia and say right up until the time of the actual invasion, they trusting their head of state, Vladimir Putin, who said there will be no invasion. And then they carried water, they carried dirty water for him, and they were forced to lie to the international community. That's a terrible taint on the honor and dignity of Russia. And the Russian people whose sons and daughters are now being ordered into an illegal, immoral invasion with their neighbors and their friends, they have families. There's families in the Ukraine with relatives in Russia. and the soldiers who are being forced to go in based on lies, to go in there and attack civilians. It's a terrible thing for their souls, for their lives. And the Russian people who are now being deprived of their basic civil liberties to protest and to speak out and dissent and have free and fair elections. So I reach out to them, and I reach out to all the people all over the world who are rightfully afraid at this moment, afraid because the head of state of a country with the largest nuclear arsenal, over 6,000 nuclear warheads today, has threatened the entire world and said that if we come to the aid of those who are being oppressed there in Ukraine, that he's threatened us with annihilation. This is very serious. This goes beyond the boundaries of just violating Article 2 of the United Nations Charter that prohibits the use of force except in self-defense, and there's no self-defense. The Ukraine was not a threat, is not a threat to Russia. The only exception is if there's it leaving no recourse or pursuant to a Security Council resolution authorizing force. There was nothing like that. This is a pure act of illegal, immoral aggression against an innocent neighbor, and based on lies. There was no genocide threatened to the eastern portion of the Ukraine. This is absurd. The challenge to the world by putting nuclear weapons into play not only challenges basic sanity, it challenges the very fabric of modern civilization that rests upon the peaceful resolution of disputes. And in the nuclear age, the violent expression using nuclear weapons would be the end of civilization. Let's be very clear what's at play here. The end of civilization. The unthinkable has become thinkable. The legal aspect of it is there is a treaty, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which I believe is the third most important legal instrument of the 20th century. The most important legal instrument being the United Nations Charter, which sets up a way in which all the nations of the world can come together and say we, and mean the entirety of the human family. Is it imperfect? Are there injustices intrinsic in its order? The privilege of the five permanent members of the Security Council, who are actually the 5 nuclear weapon states in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty? Yes. Are there problems in it? Yes. But is it a step toward a coherent, safe world? Absolutely. Is it a place where we can address the big existential threats to humanity that we have to protect the oceans, which provides 50% of our oxygen? Is it a place where we can come up with a way of protecting the climate, which we all depend upon? Is it a place where we can talk about protecting the rainforests, which are like our third lung? Is it a place where we can deal with pandemics collectively, and in a sense, a place in which human security itself can be pursued? Absolutely. Does this violation of the UN Charter challenge that order? Absolutely. For that reason, it's utterly unacceptable. The second most important legal instrument is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which safeguards and articulates the dignity of every individual. It also even says, the Human Rights Commission has said that the threat to use nuclear weapons is a violation of human rights. This is a threat that violates all of our human rights. And the third most important instrument is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And I urge the international press to highlight this affront to that important fabric of global security. Now, that treaty has every nation in the world in it except for 4: India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. And it has a core bargain. If countries renounce nuclear weapons, as Ukraine did in 1994 when it gave up approximately 3,000 nuclear warheads and gave them to Russia, with the promise by Russia, the United States, the United Kingdom, that its territorial integrity would be safeguarded. That was part of the quid pro quo, giving them up under the Budapest Memorandum. and then subsequently joined the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as a non-nuclear weapon state, in that second instrument, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Russia and the United States, China, the United Kingdom, and France pledged to negotiate the elimination of nuclear weapons. And in subsequent conferences reviewing the progress in that regard, and there has been progress, because we've gone down from over 65,000 nuclear weapons to less than 14,000. That's considerable. But there was a promise to lower the political currency, lower the reliance on nuclear weapons. And this threatening the entire world with nuclear threat is a frontal assault on that solemn legal duty. So the conduct of Russia of violating the territorial integrity of the Ukraine not only violates the UN Charter, not only violates the Budapest Memorandum, but it violates the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as well. I don't believe that Russia expected the resilience and the courage of the people in leadership, Mr. Zelensky, for example, to stand up with such vigor to this incursion. I don't believe that he expected to see this kind of solidarity, this solidarity expressed with tangible help from the Dutch, who are giving rocket launchers, the Estonians, who missile launchers, Sweden and Finland giving weaponry, the Poles, the Latvians, the Czechs, and Germany, all coming together to the aid of the people of the Ukraine, and people all over the world saying, we are part of your family, our brothers and sisters in the Ukraine. And this offense to you is an offense to us. So today there was a General Assembly resolution in which 141 countries to 5, only 5 objected to it, 141 to 5, called out Russia for this illegal conduct and called on Russia to stop what they're doing. Stop the killing, stop this illegal war, and negotiate peacefully a resolution. That is the only way in which we can survive in this modern age. Otherwise, if we permit this kind of conduct, I regret to say that bullets become verbs. And in the nuclear age, such a course of action is truly unthinkable. And so our prayers, our hearts, our passions, our energy are with those in particularly in the Ukraine and in Russia who are suffering today.
Thank you, Jonathan. You mentioned the legal system, which is so important, and the legal system has obviously broken down between Russia and Ukraine. Before I ask Dimitri what his thoughts are, you mentioned to me today the challenge of dealing with people who see themselves as outside of that legal system. It's all very well for governments around the world to come up with a framework that everyone agrees on, but there are always going to be some people who don't agree to see the world in that way and who refuse to adhere to legal frameworks. How do you convince people to become part of that framework?
I believe the people of Russia, the leadership of Russia, the diplomats, the political class of Russia understands the importance of treaties, of contracts, of laws, of speaking honestly to one another. And that the international community has spoken, 141 countries have stepped up. But now that nuclear weapons have been put on the table, the nuance that's going to be needed by diplomats, by the political class, by all of us, has reached a height that there's no facile, simple solution. How do we deal with a dictator who has put at risk all of our lives and threatened all of our lives? This is a unique circumstance in which solidarity is going to be necessary, and we cannot give any quarter to any justification for this conduct. I'm sorry to say that there is no simple off-ramp for Putin coming. I think the General Assembly resolution rightfully talks about coming back to the Minsk Accords. providing a domestic political solution in Ukraine. I think that is absolutely necessary. That's the course of action. What's lacking on the Russian side presently is the leadership with political will to do so. And that has to come. He has to hear the conscience of humanity and hear his own conscience. He is a human being. He has a conscience. I believe that he has a belief in some form of mythical, transcendent national identity. That's all well and good, but it doesn't give him the right, or nor is it practical to be violating international law to pursue it. Grant, I don't have a simple solution to that, but I believe that this is a time presently while bullets are flying and children are at risk, kindergartens are getting bombed, hospitals are getting bombed. This is a time in which we have to raise our voices of condemnation and make it clear that the vast mass of humanity finds this unacceptable. China is not going to be a practical solution for Russia as the world turns hostile to these policies. It's not against Russia; it's against these policies, and I don't believe that even the Chinese want to put at risk the future of humanity with nuclear threats and with violating the sovereign rights of neighbors. I don't think anybody wants that.
Sure.
Yes. The people in Russia, do they want to put their money in the banks in Beijing or their money in the banks of Switzerland? Obviously, China has moved toward becoming a great power and a nation that has to integrate with the rest of the world and respect contract rights, but it has a ways to go. If you're in Russia, where do you want to put your money? What bank do you want to put it in, Switzerland or Beijing? You can answer that question pretty obviously.
Jonathan, I'd like to go to Dimitri now. Thank you so much for those insights. Dimitri, it must be incredibly challenging for you to be reporting on something which is so personal. Could you maybe share with us what you're experiencing and what you're seeing as things unfold on a day-to-day basis?
Well, you're right, because my job here in Washington, D.C. is covering the reaction of the State Department. I'm covering Pentagon. Just today, I was on a press conference of John Kirby. And, you know, it's extremely difficult because it's personal. I'm trying to separate myself, but I'm unable to separate. You know, I got my family in Kiev, and every time, I'm not a boy anymore, I'm in my 40s, but every time when I'm getting the text from them and I see that they spend the night in some basement, or they spend the night in the underground station, in metro station, because it is bombing, because it's artillery strikes on Kiev, I got tears on my eyes. I think I have the right to compare the situation which is going right now with the coronavirus. Do you remember when it started, when this pandemic and all the restrictions started, we told ourselves, I want my life back. And right now we understand that, okay, we will not live the previous life anymore. It may be less restrictions, it may be less masks on the streets, but anyway, life has changed completely, totally. And every day the virus may mutate, and we will be in the same situation. And I think the same is with this war. It's not about Ukraine. It's not about only Ukraine. We got this virus when the huge country, the founder member of the United Nations, just invaded, creating a pretext, but without any real pretext, the smaller neighbor. And the virus has spread it already. So what to expect next? China invading Taiwan, or any other huge country invading the neighbor country. And right now we see that, unfortunately, with all the respect with the United Nations and with all my great respect to countries who are supporting Ukraine and voting for those resolutions, we see that there's no real solution and there is no real pressure on Russia. I was told a couple of times in the State Department, off record and on the record, that, okay, those sanctions, the American sanctions, they have not only to punish Russia, but to stop Putin from further invasion. Right now we see the punishment, but Russian forces are going to Kiev, and the latest which I got from Pentagon today that in 2-3 days they may get the Ukrainian capital encircled, and we're expecting the airstrikes. So personally, it's extremely difficult. As for the journalist, I'm trying to gather the information, but unfortunately, even speaking off records with a lot of speakers, a lot of newsmakers, I don't see the clear understanding in their eyes or in their thoughts what will happen next.
Jonathan, you spoke about the consequences of this invasion. And so that might be talking about what comes next, but what would you suggest to Dimitri would be the consequence? And Dimitri, I'd love you to answer that same question as well. What are the consequences of this invasion? Where do you think it's going to end up? And who will be held accountable?
It would be arrogant for me to predict the consequences, and it would be incredibly arrogant for me to be, suggesting anything to Dimitri, whose knowledge of the situation is so intimate and real and existential. But I do think that what we have seen globally, and this is also part of the phenomena of the pandemic, is intelligent people everywhere have realized that the model of security based on national militarism is a road that leads to this sort of overreach in the hands of, especially in the hands of dictators and people with unchecked power. But even in the hands of freedom-loving democracies, it's an inadequate approach to the existential problems that humanity faces. By existential, I mean we have to deal with them. 50 to 70% of our oxygen comes from the health of the oceans. And the changing of the climate is going to affect the Gulf Stream. It's going to affect the health of the oceans. This is not a lifestyle issue. This is a survival issue of humanity, and it's also a moral issue of our arrogance in playing with Planet A. You can have Plan A and Plan B, but there's no Planet B. We don't have a right to be playing with nature. So intelligent people the world over have realized we have to have a human security approach. We have to have a cooperative approach to protect the climate and the oxygen we breathe. The same is true with diseases. You can't have a vaccine apartheid world. The virus, this pandemic will mutate and it will be with us, and it's dangerous. This violation of international law, this violation of human rights and dignity has generated a new appreciation of the need for the rule of law, the need for human solidarity. So on the one hand, I see a different road has opened in the minds of thinking people all over the world. And I'm sure this has happened in Russia as well. And that's before us. The other thing that's before us is the myth of my nation is better, is so superior to yours. My religion is so superior to yours. My race is so superior to yours that I can put everything at risk. Let me be very clear about what I'm talking about. The studies now show, and science matters and truth matters, that less than 1% of the nuclear arsenal going off, 150 nuclear bombs going off, will throw a sufficient amount of tons of soot into the stratosphere to so adversely affect agriculture on the planet Earth that civilization as we know it will end. And so even if one country uses their arsenal or a small portion of their arsenal, that country itself will be destroyed. So we're playing with instruments of destruction that are self-destructive. We've moved from mutually assured destruction to self-assured destruction. So before us is a death wish, a mythical thinking that is simply inaccurate. It's pathological. It's not the way the world can work. Or before us now, I think, is greater clarity than ever before of the need to adhere to the the motto, ironically, over the Parliament of India, one of the few countries that did not come, that abstained, shamefully abstained in its vote. But it says from the ancient scriptures, the world is one family. That is before us with greater clarity than ever before, and the alternative is before us. And how do we create a system that will prevent a dictator from putting us all at risk? How do we do that? That will be on the other side of the resolution of this crisis. And let's just pray that the resolution will not mean tremendous suffering of the people in Ukraine. In the meantime, there are 15 nuclear reactors online in 4 power plants. And those nuclear reactors are possible Chernobyls. And the IAEA has highlighted how dangerous the situation is, and have called for creating a protected zone around them. But Russia has not agreed to do so. So the nuclear reactors in the Ukraine pose a grave danger to the people of Ukraine and Russia, and yet irresponsibly they're at risk. So we're seeing the extent to which mythical thinking can lead to tremendous hazard, and we're seeing the spirit of solidarity arising in response.
Right. And Dimitri, what do you think the consequences should be? You've got almost 500,000 people who fled the country. That's 500,000 people who've now left the economy, who are fearing for their lives, who've had families disrupted, that has a ripple effect through the entire system. What do you think is going to fix this ultimately, and what do you think the consequences should be for this? How do you repair something that on this magnitude?
The most practical thing, I wish, I believe, and I think that the country will struggle. What I got from military sources that right now, as of today, the delay in Russia's plans are for 5 days. So initially, they decided that 5 days ago, they have to capture Kyiv and to move forward. I'm absolutely agree with what was told, that Russia hasn't expected such a great and such a harsh fight. I'm agree that they never expected such a support of the international community. And if the world just invented the vaccine from coronavirus, I think that the vaccine from the behavior like this should be found. But I don't know what might work. I'm in contact with the politicians in my country, and they believe world will support Ukraine financially with the military aid, but even they don't have a solution, and even they don't have a request what should be done for Ukraine just to stop this. Can UN peacekeeper mission help? I don't think so. Can one more resolution help? We don't know. It was a discussion in the State Department. I don't know is it public right now or not, but it even was a discussion what will happen if we will kick Russia from the UN Security Council. Okay, there is no clear answer what will happen next. We may destroy something, we may destroy this old system which has worked, but we may not stop this invasion. So what will happen next? I perfectly understand that the country will struggle. I perfectly understand that America will support Ukraine more and more. This Friday, when President Biden told about the sanctions against the Russian banks, I heard from my Ukrainian friends, is it all? Okay, I was told, and we see it right now, that we got the sanctions against Putin and Lavrov. We got these sanctions against the old financial system, possibly against the central bank. So I got it that American international community will support Ukraine more and more. We will have more sanction packages. We will have more steps, but it's extremely difficult to predict what will happen. Will we have Ukraine whole? Will we have the Ukraine as an independent country? It's extremely difficult to me to tell this. It's even extremely difficult to me to predict something. But all that I know, that the country will struggle, that the people will struggle. There are a lot of people who are trying to go to Western Ukraine to hide in the cities like Lviv or Ivano-Frankivsk. But at the same time, there are millions of people who told themselves that they will stay and they will struggle.
Right, I think it's valuable to say what 141 nations have said. I mean, you asked me, but let me say what the wisdom of the international community has come up with, and it's important that journalists not be cynical. There's a pandemic of cynicism in the journalist community. We need a vaccination of vision, a vaccination of hope, a vaccination of our humanity. And I think you can find it in this resolution. It's surprisingly clear. It demands that the Russian Federation immediately, completely, and unconditionally withdraw all its military forces from the territory of Ukraine within internationally recognized borders. It deplores the decision by the Russian Federation to the status of certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. It demands that all parties fully comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law to spare the civilian population. And it calls upon the parties to abide by the Minsk agreements, which talk about a domestic civil solution there, and work constructively in relevant international frameworks. And then they list various frameworks, diplomatic frameworks. The UN system has a methodology, but right now the political will has not arisen in Russia. But the clear call of the international community is stop the incursion and leave. There was recently the meeting of the Intergovernmental Panel on the Climate. So while this is going on, there's actually fires in the tundra in the northern part of Russia, where methane is being released into the atmosphere and affecting the atmosphere for generations to come. This is absolute insanity for Russia to be invading a neighbor and not taking care of the planet Earth that's within their care. The methane released in their part of the world happens to be 3 times the global average of methane, and methane is the most toxic climate affecting substance that we have, and they're not taking care of that. So at the Intergovernmental Panel talks recently, there were delegates from 195 nations, and I just want to highlight the courage of Oleg Anisimov, who was there representing Russia, and he publicly apologized for what his country did. So I think there's going to be more Olegs coming up. I call upon the diplomats of Russia to inform the Russian people of what international law requires of them, of what the international community has said. The people of Russia have to know that their country has gone rogue, and that it is not acceptable to the international community. And journalists have to find ways of informing the people of Russia. That's an obligation of that skill. I don't know how you're going to do it, but that's your job, is to inform the public on the matters that matter.
People feel so helpless on the individual level. You know, events are so big. You have military might against you. Somebody was asking in the comments earlier just about what civil society and individuals can actually do. And Dimitri, I know that your country is fighting very bravely. We've seen old people and young people picking up arms to defend their country. What, beyond physical interactions, what else can individuals do to apply pressure or to raise awareness?
Right now, country is trying to invite into foreign citizens, I mean, American Ukrainians, but not only American Ukrainians, just the foreign citizens, to come to the country and to fight. It's controversial, but it is what was announced. Secondly, I think that financial support is extremely important. Maybe you see those pictures on the CNN or on TV, but it hurts so very much when I'm receiving some photos or some information about the families I know who are just hiding on their way, trying to escape, who are just sitting without any food. And it is the situation when we got people without any food expecting to be saved, because the roads are not safe anymore. The railway connection with the capital is still working, but anyway, it's still dangerous. So I think there are two. I think the most important thing is financial support, and secondly, it is the pressure on local politicians. If we speak about America, is the pressure on senators and members of the Congress. I spoke with a couple of members of the Congress yesterday, and it is an idea to close the sky under Ukraine, or even part of the sky under Ukraine. As I understand, it is a support of this idea in Congress, but the administration is still undecisive on this issue. So, as I understand Ukrainians, as I speak to a lot of my friends and colleagues, they expect financial support. It's really needed right now. They expect military support. They expect arms because they're ready to fight. And thirdly, they expect more pressure on the politicians and more important decisions.
I would urge that that part of the whatever solution, have one of the pillars of it is the importance of the rule of law. And Hans Karel has an excellent briefing material that's in the chat for journalists. And it's he calls it his guide to politicians, but it's also an excellent guide to journalists to become conversant with the tools that we have. The public has to know we have we have legal tools that have been dormant, that haven't been respected and used. Look, the United States suffered 4 years with an administration that had very little respect for international law. Very serious. We pulled out of the INF Treaty. We pulled out of Open Skies, and we did not use these tools. And I think that's part of how we got where we are. We can't allow that backsliding on one of these tools of civilization to continue. The plea is more than money. I think that civil society organizations that have skills and advocacy have to go and make the cases to the American public, to Rotary clubs, to social organizations. I know the American Bar Association, the lawyers organizations, are in touch with lawyers organizations in the Ukraine, and we're expressing our solidarity. This has to become a global, unified voice. Otherwise, that we have no hope. Otherwise, we cannot accelerate this conflict to a nuclear exchange, and Putin has put that on the table. So we have to exercise every tool of solidarity we possibly can: money, voices, and educating the American people that there is no quarter. Shame on any politician that gives any moral equivalency to this. It is absolutely unacceptable. I don't know if treason is a technical term for a lawyer, so I won't use it, but it sure feels and smells like it. Yeah. That this is absolutely against all of the values of my country, the United States, what Russia has done. And any politicians that don't join in a unity now and stop bickering over lifestyle issues, this is serious. And politicians in my country have to be challenged to grow up and not deal with the trivialization of these matters. The planet's health, the health of our civilization is at risk. We have got to come back to dealing with the climate, with pandemics, with the ocean, and the rule of law. We cannot be bickering over small matters. This is the unthinkable that we have to think about.
Jonathan, you rightly said earlier today when I spoke with you that physical distance means nothing anymore. the fact that Putin's moving into Ukraine to create a buffer zone for NATO means absolutely nothing, because we have supersonic weapons now that can be anywhere in the planet in minutes. So whether you have a nuclear weapon right up to the border or 10,000 miles away doesn't really mean anything anymore. So this is a threat to the world. Ukraine might be the focus of that threat right now, but what are your thoughts on the bigger picture, that everyone in the world is a threat, and everyone should be taking this very seriously?
Yeah, well, I keep in a sense harping on the bigger picture, because what has happened in the last 100 years in humanity is that everything that's local is global. The local has become global, and the global has become local. And the problem we have is politicians who are thinking locally and not realizing we're acting globally, and populations that are voting and expressing their values without recognizing the nature of modernity. The nature of modernity is defined by the technology of modernity, and nuclear weapons are just one expression of it. The internet that allows us to have this discussion has brought us together in the Zoom world that's arisen since the pandemic is extraordinary. That as we're speaking today, our brother from the Ukraine is speaking to people everywhere in the planet Earth. This reality that we are the reality, this is not some mystical reality, mystical expression, that we are on a very rare planet in a vast infinite solar system, where the capacity to live in accord with the gift of the natural world is not just an aesthetic issue, it is a survival issue. And the recognition of that now is, let me give an analogy. You could not go from the city-state to the nation-state until you had the Gutenberg press, because there was no possibility of a national identity, because people were speaking different languages. Say in Normandy and Lyon, there were different languages. You didn't have a French until you had the Gutenberg press that could create a national grammar and a language. We have today, through this technology that we're doing right now, the possibility of a global language, of an ability to see people close up everywhere and see our common interest. The people of Russia and the people of Ukraine are, there's no hatred there. There's no ideological reason for this war. This war is driven by mental distortion, a misperception. And the cure is the cure of reason, rationality. The cure is what makes us human. And the most basic thing that we've learned, I believe, is that nations' security is largely dependent on their neighbor's security. And neighborhood today is a moral location. The crushing indignity that took place after World War I led to the chaos of Nazism. The wisdom of the Marshall Plan led to trading partners and democracy. The wisdom of the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN will lead to a better world. But we can't reason with people that call that literally Putin called the leadership of Ukraine Nazis. Calling Jews Nazis is not only insane, it's so offensive. It shocks. It goes into the realm of the absurd. This is a war of the absurd, and basic reason has to bring all of us together and use every tool that we can.
Jonathan, Dmitry, Grant, this is a really fascinating conversation. I would like to bring on the stage some of the participants in this meeting tonight and let them have the opportunity to ask some direct questions to both of you. Let's start with Nancy Prager-Kamel, and then we will go to Luke, who also has some questions about NATO. Nancy, if you hear us.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead with your question.
Well, obviously, such a timely conversation, so I thank everyone for getting together and bringing it to us. But I think we've circled around many issues, but not touched the very core issue, and that's dealing with Putin. I've personally had some business with him. I will say, as you all know, that he is a massive egotist. You could possibly have unanimity in all the countries in the world, and that might stop this egregious assault. But how do you handle his hubris? Where is his way out that will be a possible solution? Because he is not going to just surrender. So, you know, where do you see, he will not go silently into the night. Where do you see the capacity to move him or remove him or contain him?
I will appreciate if we can have like short answers from both of you, so we can take the time to have as many questions as possible from our audience tonight. So let's start with Jonathan.
Well, you know, I'm reluctant to actually lay out what I think would be a successful roadmap, because he's not going to take it unless he feels that he owns it.
Mhm.
But I'll take the risk. I mean, it's possible that that if there was a federalist system like we have in the United States, where we have different states, sovereign states working together, which are quite different culturally in many ways. I mean, Portland, Oregon doesn't look much like Huntsville, Alabama. That there could be some form of federalist system arising within Ukraine, and he could claim victory for that. And that might be a roadmap out for him. But he's got to realize that he cannot succeed in ruling the Ukraine. The people of the Ukraine are not going to allow it.
Dmitry, what's your answer to this question?
Yeah, I heard so much times that all the idea of providing javelins to Ukraine, of providing different arms to Ukraine, is to increase the cost. So when first javelins were provided to Ukraine, I spoke to military guys here in Pentagon. It's just in 2 blocks from my apartment, and I was told, okay, with those javelins, you will not stop Putin, but you will increase dramatically the price of the invasion. So my understanding right now that the way to stop this is just to increase dramatically the price of the further invasion, of the further artillery shells. So if the Russian government, or if Putin himself, will see and will understand that the price of moving forward, of trying to capture Kyiv, of trying to go to possibly Western Ukraine, is high enough, is terribly high. I hope very much, and I heard some opinion that they may stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Luke Sandling.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I live and work in Washington, D.C. And can you hear me?
Yes. What's your question, Luke?
Yeah. My question is basically just, what do you think about the prospect of a NATO no-fly zone over Ukraine?
Jonathan?
Well, a NATO fly zone, most of the diplomats and military people highlight that it could be considered an act of war, because it means that you have to be able to shoot down planes, and we don't want to cross that boundary. So that's the problem. How do you create a no-fly zone, an enforceable no-fly zone, without crossing the line into the use of force and then starting World War III? So nobody that I've seen has come up with a formula that allows the need for it to be fulfilled without crossing the line of start expanding the war. And that's the problem. That's the problem that the United States and other powerful Western countries face right now, is that we have to stop, make it too expensive for Putin, but not cross the line in which we start World War III.
Yeah.
I will tell that the no-fly zone is what Ukraine needs so very much. The no-fly zone, it what Ukraine wants so very much. If you go to social media, like every second account of the Ukrainians is with the hashtags NATO or America just provide the no-fly zone. I heard the official position, and I am absolutely agree with the Jonathan that there are a lot of risks and American administration doesn't want these risks. What I heard from the members of Congress, they think about some option when it will not be military decision, but some technical decision. I haven't heard that they consider just turn off some equipment, which will which will not give the possibility, technical possibility to fly over Ukraine, or at least the part of the Ukraine, south and central Ukraine, where the capital is. But I perfectly understand that it's extremely difficult decision, and I'm afraid very much that Biden administration as well as NATO will not go for this.
Let's go to Michelle Holder. Michelle, do you have a question to ask?
Yeah, sure. So I was wondering if you guys could talk about, one of the recent headlines I have seen is Switzerland breaking their neutrality, and kind of your thoughts on that, or how you feel the news has been talking about that angle of it.
I'm not familiar with the Swiss position, so I'll let Dimitri, and especially as to how the news has been covering it, because the news that I've been reading didn't cover it. So I'll let Dimitri answer it.
Yeah, I will tell that I know what happened inside the country, and I feel so very much working for the news that every sign of support from any country is extremely important for Ukraine. So people are, sharing and sending each other the news about any decision. It was widely discussed what Switzerland did, because it gives the hope for Ukraine. It gives the understanding that we're not alone, because mostly people are just have this feeling that we're alone. Okay, we're receiving the military equipment, but no one will fight for us. Ukrainians have to fight themselves. And from another perspective, I think it might work. When President Biden told in his speeches during the State of the Union that America will fund every Russian oligarch, every money, every yacht, or every building, every account which is hidden, I think it might work, because what happens right now, I'm trying to understand the position of Russians. It's still no understanding how bad this war is. It's still not enough level of struggle inside the Russian society. And I hope so very much if other countries will go after businessmen's money or after oligarchs' money, it may change the situation inside Russia. And I hope so very much that if the situation inside Russia might change, it might change, the other decisions the Russian government just approved.
Yeah. Grace Banahan, next question she wants to ask.
I guess going off of that one, is there a specific region or a specific country that you would be surprised if they spoke out against this, or, kind of pick a side?
The question is, would we be surprised of a specific country that hasn't spoken out, speaking out?
Yeah. Isn't?
Well, the only countries that didn't support the resolution were
India.
Were Syria, North Korea, Eritrea, and Belarus. They're the only countries that voted against it. I was surprised that India abstained, and I don't understand why they did. In fact, I was shocked. The United Arab Emirates also abstained, and they will be chairing the Security Council in the coming month. But India surprised me that India abstained, and I think that it's shameful that it did, and I hope that they'll reconsider and join the rest of the world in living up to the values that they say they espouse.
Yeah. Dmitry, you want to add something?
Oh, just shortly. I understand the feelings inside the country. So if some European country will opposite some sanctions or some limitations to Russia, it will hurt. But right now we got support all across the Europe. We got support in Canada. We got support here in America, Israel. So from a Ukrainian perspective, there is no any country which unexpectedly is not supporting Ukraine.
Yeah.
I think that it's important that the money launderers for the oligarchs also be prosecuted. That includes real estate sales that launder money in the United States. That's very important.
Marlo Starling, what's your question?
Hi, so we've seen a lot of really important coverage on this, of course, from hyper-local to kind of macro scale. And I'm wondering if there's anything that that any of you think has been overlooked in the media.
Dimitri, probably.
Dmitry, I'll defer to you first, and because
Yeah.
I do have something to say on that.
Yeah, could you repeat the question? I haven't got the specific question.
Sure. Just obviously there's been a lot of really important coverage on this issue already, from kind of hyper-local things, speaking, to people on the ground, as well as more of the macro scale things that we've been talking about in this discussion. But I'm wondering if there's any aspects of this conflict that have not been reported at all, or that you think are deserving of more media attention.
Yeah, I think we should more speak and about the people aspect. Right now, all the journalists. Okay, let me give you an example. I participated in the briefing in the Pentagon today, and people are mostly asking about the movement of the equipment. They're mostly asking about Russian plans, how the capital may be in the circle of the Russian arms or Russian troops. My understanding and my feeling that we should speak about people, about the tragedy, more than about this political aspect or in military aspect. I guess that it's what happened in Ukraine and what is happening in Ukraine. It's a tragedy, not only for some families, not only for some city, but for the nation as well. So I think that media, international media, should speak about the people's stories. I think it's the most important thing.
That, to me, that's the beginning and end of all political discourse. Is how does a policy affect people, particularly the most vulnerable? That has to be the perspective, and there has to be a human face on the people of the Ukraine. I also think that the press has not contextualized this situation appropriately. I think the fact that the tundra is burning, that we're not cooperating in protecting our planet home of the climate, that's not an abstract global issue. That is a very tangible issue that cannot be put off. Just like we need to protect the forests of the planet that are being destroyed faster than they're being regenerated. These are not matters that can be put off any longer. And so the engagement in conflict creates an institutional barrier to the cooperation needed to deal with these other problems. The press is not connecting the dots, so to speak. The dots have to be connected. The press is not highlighting the importance of the rule of law, that laws are the guardrail, that laws have to be sufficiently strong to prevent authoritarian overreach. And we have a bunch of authoritarian leaders in the world today, in many countries, incompetent authoritarians who have unchecked power. And we've seen what unchecked power can lead to here, but we have them all over the world. It is my hope the press explains why democracy and checks and balances and dissent and the rule of law and freedom is so important for us. That has to be explained. People have to understand the values that are at stake. And last but not least is, if we see the basis of politics as dealing with human beings, human security, the expression of our common humanity is no longer just an abstract spiritual aspiration. It's now a necessity, and the press has to drive that home to people because it is true, and truth matters. And last but not least, when politicians lie, they need to be called out and not given moral equivalency. And Putin has been lying, and that is very serious. because then the fabric of diplomacy breaks down if words can't be trusted. And the press has to call lies, lies, and not just spin them. Lies are lies. They're not morally equivalent to an evaluation or an opinion. A lie is different than a bad opinion.
Can I quickly just ask one very good question based on what you've just said, Jonathan, earlier, was somebody's asking, is there a non-violent way of stopping Putin? How would this intervention work? It seems to come down to a personality disorder from what we've been discussing earlier. It's this, we can talk about United Nations and negotiations and ceasefires. It comes down to an individual that needs to be convinced. How do we non-violently move him away from what he's doing?
I think at this point, the most important thing is the resilience and support of the people who are fighting for their lives. And if they need weapons to protect themselves in the Ukraine right now. And the nonviolent approach is not something they can do. Their lives are in danger. However, it is through laws and diplomacy that sustainable peace can be obtained. There's no other way. So we've got to create enough discomfort for the leadership of Russia that this venture has got to be reversed, and that requires right now the physical resilience of the people in the Ukraine. We can't be preaching nonviolence to them right now because their lives will be taken. However, an international order in which common interests are recognized based on hard science of the matter that affirms our common humanity, that's the only long-term solution.
My understanding is that Ukraine may just physically stop the Russian troops. So Ivan was told that looking to satellite images, Russian militaries are putting troops and military equipment inside Donetsk and Lugansk region of Ukraine, and they're not moving them into Ukraine, which means, as I was explained, the possibility that they're working on scenario that Ukrainian troops will be strong enough just to put Russian troops out of Kyiv, out of Odessa, out of south of the country, and maybe they will just keep those regions in Donbass. So my understanding that just the real practical way is just to deter, just to fight.
Yeah. A question from Bryce Schwell.
Hi, so my question is specifically for Jonathan, and what I wanted to know is, how do you keep confidence and maintain security in international law when you have a nation like Russia who so willfully and flagrantly violates international law? Because as we've seen a few days ago, Russia, as a permanent member of the Security Council, vetoed a condemnation for their own invasion into the Ukraine. So how do you keep security and confidence in international law when you have a nation like Russia who's devolving into this realpolitik, will to power mindset that was so prevalent, 100, 200 years ago?
It's clear that we're going to have a discussion on Security Council reform and the use of the veto. This is an abuse of the use of the veto, no question about it. They're violating all norms of civilized behavior and hiding behind this organizational problem that gives them too much power. So presently, the political institution is unable to constrain such a rogue, and that is an institutional structural problem. And I agree with you. It's presently the political institution of the nation state and the nation state focused system has got to be sufficiently modified to prevent any nation state from becoming a global threat. Any nation state, the United States or any other state. One of the reasons is that with the adversity we have at the moment, should there be a computer era like there was. William Perry, former Secretary of Defense, has a book called My Journey on the Nuclear Brink, in which he describes being awakened in the middle of the night because it appeared to be a full-scale Soviet launch when it was a computer chip era. A computer chip. There was a Colonel Stanislav Petrov who was watching the computers in 1983 in the Soviet Union, and all of their computers showed a full-scale American launch. The sun was hitting an odd cloud formation. He didn't pass it up the command and control. 1995, there was a weather satellite launched off the coast of Norway that appeared to be a launch of a nuclear Trident missile headed toward Moscow. Boris Yeltsin was not told that the Norwegians had told their Russian counterparts about this being a weather satellite, and he had 8 minutes to decide what to do. The problem of the speed of technological change and the problem of the system we set up in the 1940s is incommensurate with the technology of today and the political problems we have today. We're going to have UN reform, because the problem, Bryce, that you put forward is severe and real, and our political institutions have to become have to grow up to deal with these problems. But right now, the lives of the people in the Ukraine are at risk, and that's the most important thing.
And one question from Bryce Brown, and then Bryce.
What do you believe the likelihood is of Russia's invasion of Ukraine causing China to invade Taiwan?
I don't think that China's invading Taiwan is particularly influenced by the calculations of Russia. They know that this would be they would also be engaged in a quagmire, as Russia seems to be engaged in a quagmire. It's my hope that the Chinese are observing the response, the international response to what's happening, and draw back. I'm pleased to say that when you look carefully at the statements of the leadership of China, where they talk about unification, they talk about unification by 2049. So they know that it would be costly, they know that it would be dangerous, and they know that their biggest market for their goods and services remains the United States, and they know that they would lose that market. So where are they going? How is their economy possibly going to? Possibly going to continue to grow as it has if they were to do something like that? That's my hope. On the other hand, ideologically, they refuse to recognize the legitimacy and sovereignty of Taiwan, and they have the military advantage there. So it's, again, they're a member of the Security Council. It's a very hazardous situation.
We have a few minutes left, and I think we have time for one or two more questions. I wanted to quickly ask Jonathan and Dimitri, are you happy to publicly have your emails sent through to everyone on this call in case somebody wants to follow up with a story?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Dimitri, I don't have your email, but if you'd like to put it in the chat bar, I'll put Jonathan's in the chat bar now. Please feel free to follow up with Jonathan.
Could you put Granoff at GS Institute? Take that one out.
Sure. Sure. Please ignore that one then. I will do that shortly. One of the questions in the chat bar is something, Jonathan, I know you're very passionate about, interfaith. Somebody asked if the role of world religions can help solve this problem. You sit on a couple of interfaith global boards and committees. Could you maybe speak around that? And then Dimitri, your opinion on the very close cultural ties that Jonathan also mentioned earlier between Ukraine and Russia. What do you, if there's any, what connects you more than pulls you apart? Jonathan?
Well, let me first address the second question has a legal dimension to it, and that's I have certainty in that realm. In the other realm, I'm not as certain, but certainly. So part of Russia's argument is that there's ethnic, religious, and cultural ties between the eastern portion of the Ukraine and Russia, and that therefore they can annex it. But you realize that the entirety of the Middle East and Africa, the borders were created by European powers without reference to ethnic, tribal, religious identities that bleed between borders. And if that principle that Putin is putting forward were to become an international norm, the entirety of Africa would be in total chaos, as would be the Middle East, even worse than it is today. So that's absurd. Yes, there are fabulous interfaith initiatives, the Religions for Peace, the Parliament of the World Religions, the United Religions Initiative. These initiatives have been able to forge common ground with between and amongst religions in ways that have never happened before. That's not to say that there are not toxic exclusivists in all of the faith traditions, but even the world evangelicals, for example, are not like the American evangelicals. The world evangelicals were very important in getting the Arms Trade Treaty passed. So the higher calling of humanity is still embodied in the calls of religions. Not the bottom line, but the top of us, the pursuit of the values of loving kindness and compassion and the equality of all people and the principles upon which human dignity and justice, the divine sacredness of each person. Those principles are within all of the faith traditions. And with the modern communications and transportation of the modern world, it's time that the religions serve to be a force for bringing the fabric of the hearts of the people and the spirits of people together based on those qualities and those principles that all of the faith traditions have. Every single major religion has an articulation of the golden rule one way or another. And the religions can be a force for calling on nations to adopt that ethical principle. And if you look practically speaking, that ethical principle of treating other nations as the way you want to be treated has always brought greater security when it's applied. That's why you have that's why in the regions of the world where you have nuclear weapons-free zones, you haven't had the kind of border dispute wars that we're seeing here. That's really very, very important. That where there's a common recognition of common humanity, there's the possibility, not the inevitability, but there's the possibility of finding common ground in political institutions. So religions have a huge role to play to promote the values upon which they rest, rather than the distinct ways in which they express those values. That needs to be different because there's different circumstances. But the underlying values that make us human, the religions have to put those first and foremost. They have to put the pursuit of loving kindness toward others as more important than their dogmas and their differences. They have to separate from themselves the things that separate and affirm the higher values inherent in them that bring us together. This has now become an important role of religion that it really didn't have until the modern world forced it upon us.
Dimitri, your brief thoughts on religion, and then I'm just going to ask the two of you to give a quick 30-second closing thoughts, and we'll call it a day. It's already 20 minutes past the time we had for this call, but Dimitri.
Yep, there are 2 points. Firstly, it was a message from Russia that we are going to protect Russian-speaking Ukrainians or Ukrainians who are, the inhabitants of Ukraine who are Russian. And it is obvious for me, but as I understand, it's not obvious for everyone. I spoke with a colleague from Japan, and he told me, which region are you from? I told him I'm from Odessa, Russian-speaking city. He told me, what is your mother language? I told it's Russian. And he looked at me and told, why you don't support Putin and why you don't support Russia? Because your native language is Russian and you're from Russian-speaking part of Ukraine. So I was shocked, and I understand right now that it's a confusion. I'd like to tell that even despite, for example, my personal story, I'm from Russian-speaking region and my native language is Russian, but well, there are Spanish-speaking Americans and English-speaking Americans, but they are Americans who share these values. There are French-speaking Canadians and English-speaking Canadians, but they are Canadians. Same with Ukrainians. There are Russian-speaking Ukrainians and Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians. I speak both languages, but anyway, it's not about language. It's not about even the nationality. It's more about values. And secondly, you asked what can, what can join us together. Every country, every person in both countries, we don't want the loved one to die. So everyone want to stop the war. I think it's the most important thing.
Thank you, Dmitry. Jonathan, your closing comments, please.
I began expressing my heartfelt solidarity with the people in the Ukraine who are under threat and the people of Russia, the innocent soldiers who are being forced to do acts that are immoral and illegal. And my heartfelt resonance with the billions of people that are listening to the cry of the earth, the cry of the creator, that our common humanity has to be affirmed, that war as an institution, war of aggression, war to fulfill a mythical idea, war to seize property and land, these arrogances are an offense to that conscience of humanity. Every human being has a conscience. It's often occluded and covered up by arrogance and pride and worshiping things like, we're turning religion into something they worship, turning race, turning nation into something they worship, and forgetting our common humanity. As Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein wrote at the beginning of the nuclear age, when they called upon the nations of the world to realize how everything had changed in the nuclear age, their call, and they ended their call, and they said, remember your humanity, forget the rest. I don't have a simple solution. I can only offer some thoughts, but every one of us has moral agency. Every one of us has conscience. And there may be somebody listening who has an insight that we haven't discovered yet, but we all have to intend and care and bring the best of our virtues into action. There's a call of conscience today as never before. And I hope that I have the courage to heed that call. And I hope that all of you who are listening will similarly listen in your conscience and heed that call as well.
Thank you. Dimitri?
Oh yeah, I just want to thank from the bottom of my heart to everyone who is supporting Ukraine. You know, we don't need the great things from everyone, but even the smallest sign of support is extremely important. I'll tell you, I was in the Department of State, and you know, people are follow the rules there, and some lady from the Department of State, she saw that I'm Ukrainian journalist on my page. She came to me, she hugged me, and she went out. I was literally crying, and I understand perfectly that every smallest flag on the congressman's jacket, or you know, on your car, every comment on the social media, you think it's nothing, but it supports Ukraine so very much, because people have the hope. People understand that they're not alone. People understand that someone in America, someone in Alabama or in Wisconsin or in Washington, D.C. is supporting them. So I want to thank you so very much for this support. I feel it, and people in my country, my friends, my colleagues who are there in Kyiv or in Odessa or in Lviv, they feel it so very much. And even the smallest site is important. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dimitri. And please share your email with us in case we need to get in touch with you for anything.
Dimitri, it's an honor to be with you, and the nobility and clarity that you bring to the issue, and our prayers for the safety of your family and all are with you. Thank you so much for keeping clarity under such pressure.
Thank you both so much, and thank you for everyone for joining us. Been an amazing debate. I think there are lots of things everyone's gone away with from this. I think the lesson here is to keep the debate going on a broad level. Most of the media are focusing on day-to-day, blow-by-blow accounts, which is obviously important. But this discussion for me was something that looked much broader, the historical context, what can be done, what the consequences might be. And I think keeping that debate going on all levels, on multifaceted levels, I think is very important. Thank you so much, and look forward to the next session.
Grant, we have
Yes.
to thank the Foreign Correspondents Association for putting this together with us.
Well, of course, sorry. Thank you so much to Thanos and to the Foreign Correspondents who had the quick-sightedness to put this in such short notice. This was literally came about, I think, on Friday last week, and great to see so many people could make it. And they're doing a great job of keeping the debate going in crucial times, and we hope to see a lot more debates like this. So, Thanos, the torch is over to you now to arrange the next version of Ukraine-Russia crisis, and please let us know when that will be, and we'll be there.